Find these statements expressed, for example, in the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible. In that book, there is a repeated phrase which is what? Everything is meaningless. If you were to read that book, you would walk away without paying attention to what's going on. You would walk away very confused, because the Bible is supposed to be encouraging to us, but everything is meaningless. What is he talking about? There is another phrase in that book that occurs about 28 times. I counted, maybe I missed some, but at least 28 times. And that phrase is under the sun. Under the sun. That if you look at life horizontally, without God, just horizontally, you can get whatever you want in this world. It is still going to be meaningless. Everything is vanity, a chasing after the wind. That is Solomon. And we have Brad Pitt echoing what Solomon said from his own experience. This question comes to us when what we are looking for lies right before us, and we find out it wasn't what satisfaction was all about. St. Augustine said this: "You made us for yourself, and our lives are restless until they find their rest in you." Trying to quench our thirst in this world, trying to satisfy our deepest needs with anything in this world, is like trying to quench our thirst with salty water. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. That is how life works in this world when we are just pursuing these things independently of God. You and I are finite creatures, created for a relationship with an infinite being, and no finite substitutes can ever meet our deepest needs. We are finite creatures, created for a relationship with an infinite being, and no finite substitutes can ever meet our deepest needs. That's what God means to us. Without God, there is no meaning, there is no purpose, and it's not difficult to figure that out in our lives in this world. I read a lot of philosophy, and sometimes it's very confusing. Other times it's really helpful. Let me give you an illustration by a philosopher named Njoroge, which I think is very helpful in showing us that if we achieve everything we were looking for, there will still be something missing. We are looking for something deeper. How many of you saw the movie Inception or The Matrix? Those movies. This is the experiment that he posited. Just imagine that your body is put in a tank somewhere with electrodes or coming from every part of you, and they are able to feed into you any experience that you want. You have the experience of being the most famous author in the world, or the president, or whatever. They can feed that to you. The only catch is this: you're going to be unconscious. You're not going to know anything that's going on. All that's going to be real to you is just those experiences that are fed into you. How many of us would want to be plugged into that kind of machine? Instead of doing all the work that you're doing right now to achieve what you're looking for, you are plugged in there and you have that experience. You are the most famous, you are more, everybody photographs you where you go. You have those experiences and they seem real to you. How many would want that kind of a life? Most normal people say, no, they would not want that kind of a life. Why not? Because we are looking for something real, something tangible. We want to achieve something ourselves. And that drive towards what's real, towards reality, has been put in us by God. So this question of meaning and purpose, although I ignored it for a long time, didn't care about it, I have come to see its value, especially as I talk to people and see the desperation that they live with. And if it hasn't happened to you, it will. It will one day, and you had better be prepared when that time comes. You had better have something stronger to hold on to than just your job, your reputation, or anything else. And the only thing that can truly do the job is the God who made you, the God who created you. So the meaning and the purpose of life. The other area that I have chosen is the objectivity of morality. The objectivity of morality. And this, when we talk about the objectivity of morality, it's good to define those terms. What we are talking about is this: you and I live in a world in which right and wrong, do's and don'ts, come already defined for us. We do not invent morality. We discover morality. We discover right and wrong. and we find ourselves existing in a universe that tells us there are things we should do and things we should not do, regardless of what any human being says. How in the world can that be true if there is no moral lawgiver behind the existence of the universe and behind our own existence? I could talk about this topic for the rest of the week because I've been writing a dissertation on it, so I'm going to resist the temptation to do that. But this is an issue that is truly important, this question of morality and how we experience the moral life in this world. That there are do's and don'ts, obligations that we did not create. Where did they come from, and how is that possible if God doesn't exist? You do away with God, you're doing away with the moral lawgiver, and you live yourself without any anchor for what is right and for what is wrong, which is a serious, serious place to be. And that's why you will find many people who are even atheists telling us that it is true, that without God we really don't have morality. And actually some of them will tell you that's the reason they don't want God, because they don't want anyone to tell them what to do. They want to be able to decide for themselves what they want to do. But if that's what you want to do, you are behaving like a child who closes his eyes and thinks the room has become dark so he can steal sugar, and the mom won't see what's going on because the room is dark. Close his eyes. Just closing our eyes before God doesn't change anything about the reality of whether or not God exists. In an essay called Confessions of an Ex-Moralist, Professor John Marks, a highly, highly qualified professor in the US, says this. He's an atheist, and he doesn't believe in God, and he struggles with this issue of morality, and he writes this. I had thought that I was a secularist because I conceived of right and wrong as standing on their own 2 feet without prop or crutch from God. We should do the right thing because it is the right thing to do, period. But this was a God too. It was the godless God of secular morality which commanded without a commander, whose ways were even more mysterious than the God I did not believe in, who at least had the intelligible motive of rewarding us for doing what he wanted. He says this, he was thinking morality can just stand on its own without God, so we can have our cake and eat it, just have the morality and not God. And all we are doing when we do that is we are just denying, clinging to the effect or denying the cause. And he says, if you are holding on to right and wrong, the way things should be, and you don't believe in any design plan for the universe, you don't believe in God, you are worshiping an idol. Those are good words coming from a person who is an atheist. He's at least honest in what he sees around himself. Once you get rid of God, you are left with a world that has no definite way it ought to be. And so to talk about right and wrong really makes no sense. Right and wrong become what you and I decide to call right and wrong, and we can call anything right or wrong, and anything goes if there is no standard, if there is no moral law giver. We can talk about this at the end during the Q&A, so that I'm trying to save some time for that. So you do away with God, you do away with meaning and purpose in life, and you also do away with morality. The third thing that I said I'll mention very briefly is the intrinsic value of human beings. Because if you believe in morality, you believe in ethics, you believe there are things that should not be done to human beings. For example, things like murder, stealing from people, and rape and all those things should not happen at all. But when you do that, you are assuming that human beings have intrinsic value. They have intrinsic worth. Where does that come from if God doesn't exist? Do you know why the world, especially the Western world, came to believe so strongly that we all have intrinsic value as human beings? It is because of the biblical teaching that we were all made in the image of God. When people began to believe we were made in the image of God, they also began to believe that we are valuable as human beings. You take out the image of God in man or woman, there is nothing that makes us equal as human beings. That's very easy to show. Some people are tall, taller than others are short. Some people are dark, others are white. Some people are, you name it. We have all kinds of differences. What makes us the same as human beings? My wife and I have two boys who were both born in Los Angeles around the same time the children of a famous celebrity were born. When in the hospital where these celebrities' kids were born, there were all kinds of people with cameras like this one trying to take pictures of those babies. But at the hospital where my boys were born, I was the only person who showed up there. Even though my boys are much better looking. We don't come into this world equal in any sense of the term. We come with very, very many differences. The only reason that we believe, that you believe it, if you do believe this in this room, that we are equal as human beings, is because of biblical teaching that we were all made in the image of God. You take that out, and there is nothing that makes us equal as human beings, the intrinsic value of human being. Now, if what I have said so far is true, we can ask the question, then what options do we have to answer this issue, to approach this issue? How are the answers given? We often get asked this question in many places that we go to. Well, have you investigated everything else is false? Is it not possible that you have missed something in your studies? That sounds like a very, very daunting question, but the answer to it is not all that difficult, because all the worldviews in existence can be grouped under only 3 categories, depending on what they say about God and the universe. Depending on what our worldview says about God and the universe, is going to fall under one of 3 categories. On the one extreme, you have the view that only the universe exists. God doesn't exist. That's what we're talking about. Does God exist? That would be atheism and naturalism. There are many different versions of this view, that only the universe exists, God doesn't exist. On the other extreme, you have the view, believe it or not, that the universe doesn't exist, only God exists. That's kind of strange for us here, because many of us may not be familiar with that thinking, but it's the foundational thought in religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and also the New Age movement. They believe this, that the reason you think that you exist and other things exist is because you haven't learned how to meditate. And if you could meditate properly, you'll be able to see that everything is all one inclusive whole. Everything is one. And that view is usually called monism in the literature. Everything is one. The universe doesn't exist, only God exists. Then you ask the question, what about all the people and the trees and the cameras and all these things? What do you mean only God exists? And they will tell you this. Those are like drops out of the ocean. If you take the drop and put it back in the ocean, its individuality disappears and everything becomes just one, just water, just one. Everything is one in the end. We are all a part of God, and everything is, only God exists, the universe doesn't exist. In the middle, we have the view that both the universe and God exist. God is eternal and uncaused, and the universe was created by God. And under that, the only serious competitors are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So then it's not difficult to classify these views and be able to critique them without being an expert in all of them. You just need to figure out what they say about God and the universe, and it becomes very easy to be able to critique them. Now, we don't have the time to critique these views in detail tonight, but I want to tell you, this view that only the universe exists has come under serious trouble in our time. Atheism has come under serious trouble in our time, because for a long time, atheists told us, atheist philosophers and scientists told us that the universe is eternal. It has always existed. But they have come to discover that that is not true. It actually began to exist. Matter, time, energy, all came into existence at a logical moment. They all began to exist. So if it is true that they began to exist, then you have to ask the question, what kind of entity? If you also believe that nothing comes out of nothing, that if you began with nothing, you will always end up with nothing. So what was it that brought the universe into existence? And whatever did that must be an entity that transcends time, because it's created time, so it must be timeless. It must be non-physical, because it created space and matter and all that, so it must be immaterial. It must be extremely powerful, given the vastness of the universe, extremely intelligent, given the complexity of the universe, and it must be personal, because it could make decisions. And all these attributes are the attributes that have been given to God from the beginning. And the Bible tells us right from the beginning that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It went against the wisdom of the time in those days by telling us the universe actually began to exist, which has been discovered today. There was a scientist at the NASA Institute for Space Studies in the US. His name was Robert Jastrow. And in his book, God and the Astronomers, he wrote this. He said this: "For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance, is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries." He wasn't a believer. He was not a believer when he wrote that, but he said, what we are seeing is exactly what the Bible said we would find. The universe began to exist and was actually made by a being who transcends that universe. So this view that only the universe exists is a difficult one to maintain in our time. What about this view that only God exists, the universe doesn't exist? This one has a lot of problems in it, logical problems. In order for you to deny your own existence, you must exist first. You must be there to say, I don't exist. That's a logical contradiction. It doesn't work. I remember speaking to a man who was highly educated. He had 3 PhDs to his name, but he was an ardent follower of the New Age movement. And he told me that everything is one. If you learn how to meditate, you will see that everything is one, nothing else exists. So I said to him, have you ever been able to do this yourself? He said, yeah, I do it all the time. I said, so what you're telling me is this: you've been able to meditate and find out that you don't exist. He said, that's exactly right. He said, then who is it that's coming back to tell me that you don't exist? I'm still waiting for an answer to that, because there are way too many problems. I'm not going to belabor the point, but these views are very difficult to sustain. But when you look at what the Bible has to say, and you look at our experience in this world, and this is not special pleading. I'm not just presenting a case and telling you that the Bible is better. I'm giving you reasons which we can talk about after this. But when you look at what the Bible has to say, you see that it actually fits our experience in this world very, very well in many, many ways. And so the Bible tells us, for example, that we were made in the image of God, and so every human being is sacred. So we can already account for the intrinsic value of every human being, and we can account for the objectivity of morality, because we are dealing with a being who is moral, who is good, and who made us in his image and made it possible for us to be aware of that moral realm, but independent of us, but we are able to apprehend it and to apply it in our life. And the Bible tells us there's life after death, and so what we do in this world matters, not just for now, but also for eternity. There is meaning, there is purpose for everything that we do in this world. And when we look at the nature of the relationships with each other and the role they play in giving our lives meaning and purpose and all that, and having people who would come all the way, like the team who have been with us for a while, coming all the way from the US to come here and help us. My wife and I run an orphanage, a children's home with 29 children. And we have a lot of people who have been helping us make that possible. And they only do it because of their faith in God and their belief that these children's life have been abandoned out there. Our youngest child in that orphanage is 6 months old, and she was thrown away in Naivasha in the bushes the day she was born with the umbilical cord still attached. The doctors were on strike, the nurses were on strike, and so they called us and said, can you please take care of this child? We believe that child's life is as valuable as anybody else's life. And we have people who believe the same thing. And you know, you will get to the point, if you've never really learned to value and love relationship, love people, you get to the point where that will be the case for you someday. I remember sitting across the table from a man who was highly successful in every earthly meaning of that term. He told me that when he was young, he set some goals for his life. He said, I want to live in a particular neighborhood, driving particular kinds of cars, with people in a certain level of society for friends. He said to me, I have achieved all that today. I have achieved everything that I was looking for. And then he said this, but I want you to know that I would give it all back if I could have another chance to be a husband to my wife and a father to my children. In the pursuit of his goals and dreams, he had neglected what was most important, which is relationships. And the ultimate relationship that brings all this together for us is our relationship with God. And that God has decisively revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ. And let me give you 3 reasons why. I could give you more, but let me just give you 3 reasons why I believe the Bible fits our life so perfectly. And the first reason is this: the accuracy of the diagnosis that Jesus gave for our condition as human beings, for the human condition. His accurate diagnosis of the human condition. Jesus said that your problem and my problem is that we have sinned and rebelled against God. That's our problem. If you ask the atheist, people will say only the physical universe exists. What's wrong with that? They don't even have the means to phrase the question that I want to give an answer. If you ask these people who say only God exists, if you ask them what's wrong with that, they will tell you our main problem is we haven't learned how to meditate. We don't have enlightenment. What we need is enlightenment, and we'll be able to understand who we really are. That's what they will tell you. We need enlightenment. Jesus said our real problem is sin. We have sinned and rebelled against God. And we prove him right every waking moment of our day. Just think about it. When you are young, your parents and teachers teach you who you are, your name, and how to write it, how to say it. You say it 1,000, maybe a million times, if we can exaggerate a little bit. And then what do we do when we grow up? We have to walk around with picture IDs to prove that the names we call ourselves are really our names. How can that be when we have learned who we are for so long? It's because we can't trust each other. We know our real condition as human beings. When some young people somewhere break into a petrol station and they steal some things there, some people will tell you, these people just need education. If they were educated, they would not do this. What do we say when our most educated human beings on this planet bankrupt our banking systems? What do we say then when they are the most educated people? We know exactly what we are like as human beings. We have just learned how to live with sin. I was invited to go and speak at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. And I wasn't a US citizen, and it's a government facility, very, very protected. So they sent me a stack of forms to fill out before I could. I know I'm okay because I was allowed to go there finally. I had to fill out these forms. They asked me all kinds of questions. Your name, where you were born, any country you've ever visited, and why and who you saw there, any phone number you've ever had, all those kinds of things. They asked me where I was born. They almost asked me why I was born. And when I got there, they told me to put my car to the side. They checked everything, even under the car. They took off the mask and the visors and everything. They checked the engine, mechanics or something. They checked everything. And going in there, it's like going through the airport where they give you they even give you a badge. They tell you you cannot go to any room except where you are speaking. That's what they told me. When I got there, I said to them, you people have made my case really, really easy, because I was here to convince you that human beings are sinful. Why would you go through all that process if you didn't already believe that human beings are sinful and they're not to be trusted? So they made my case really easy. And it was, like I said, we do this over and over again. Let me give you another example. When you travel a lot and you go to many places where they don't like the gospel and all that, you can't just show up and say, I'm here to preach. They would never give you a visa if you say that. So people learn to do things and say things like, I'm a lecturer, I'm a tourist, I'm coming to see your country, those kind of things. And sometimes, even in the US, you run into trouble if you say you are a preacher, if you're just that honest. So I got there, one day I was really tired, got there with my family, and this guy who was processing us at the immigration desk, he looked at my passport, he said, you travel a lot, what kind of work do you do? And I said to him, I am a preacher of the gospel. I tell people that forgiveness of sin is available through Jesus Christ. You should have seen his face. He said to me, I have never sinned. I'm not a sinner. I said to him, then clearly the gospel message is not for you, it's for sinners. I said, but I am very curious. He had a ring on his finger. I said, I'm very curious. You are the first person I've met who was not a sinner. And I'm very, very curious about this. I said to him, would your wife agree with your assessment of yourself? He almost threw his passport at me. And it was clear his wife had made him know a few times that he wasn't perfect. And if you're sitting here and you think you're perfect, you need to get married. Jesus diagnosed your condition and my condition perfectly. We are sinners. We have rebelled against God. And we only deny it for our own convenience. When we are honest, we know exactly what we are like as human beings, and that's why we don't even trust each other. But Jesus didn't just diagnose the problem. He offered a powerful, powerful solution to our condition. He maintained the infallible integrity of God and honored God's justice and love at the same time. That's incredible. Because justice requires that evil be punished. And when it's punished by a holy God, we are punished eternally. We are separated from God eternally. And yet his love calls him towards you and towards me. So how was this going to be done? By sending his son on the cross. That's why the cross was necessary. Dying in your place so that by his merits we could be able to stand before God. The problem was solved through Jesus Christ. And that is an incredible, incredible fact that love met justice, justice met mercy at the cross, good met evil, and good triumphed because of the wisdom and the power of God. And love won on the cross. And if you and I are truly honest, we will know that this is a message that should resonate with each one of us and that we need the solution that God has given us. But many times we are really not all that honest. Someone sent me a story that